The canonicity of a video game series is often played pretty fast and loose. New developers come in, different ideas, and usually gameplay always triumphs over narrative stability. And while that's true with many games out there, RPGs, Fallout in particular, are severely subject to scrutiny by the fandom due to the focus on plotline and world building. But with the age of the franchise and a variety of supplemental material out there, ranging from official guides to design documents, what is and isn't canon becomes a lot more blurry. Let's talk about the canonicity of Fallout. I'll be honest, I feel like I may be stepping out of line a bit talking about a canon of an IP I do not own. I'm a YouTuber, not a dev, and therefore cannot declare something canon or non-canon. What I can do is talk about the commonly accepted set of canon. I can also talk about some different interpretations about said canon from various, although significantly smaller, groups, and what justification they may have for their opinions. For now, let's focus on what most accept as canon. Here is a chart I have created for the ease of reading. However, even this will have some level of wiggle room, which is unsurprising given the various sources of information this franchise has. So you could put an asterisk beside the chart, but most considerations will work very similar to this one. There's two primary levels, canon and non-canon. I represent this with a prominent line in between the top and bottom levels. A rather binary viewpoint, and for some this is enough. But it also isn't that simple. While yes, those two levels exist and seem contradictory to each other, there's a number of sub-levels between each. I represent this by a variety of colors. Blue is 100% canon. This is the important games, 1, 2, 3, New Vegas 4, and 76. Right below that is newer developer commentary. These two are fairly interesting, because while some may view this chart as a bit of a hierarchy with games overruling anything below it, developer commentary may try to force some corrections on mistakes put into the games. A word of God, so to speak. I tried to reference this correction attempt with a broken line right here. Green is right below blue. Assume canon unless contradicted. The last bit of the canon portion and the beginning of the non-canon has this color, respectively. That's supplemental material such as guides, manuals, and promotional content such as comics. These often have bits of new information that usually don't contradict the events in games, but also do not have very much game material supporting them either. An example would be Star Paladin Cross being a cyborg. The other one to share this group is the Fallout Bible and older developer commentary. I'm primarily talking about the Fallout Bible as it is the largest source of older developer commentary. But this also can include comments from an arbitrary amount of time, with the change of management, direction, etc. Now, the Fallout Bible is an interesting source because even in the days of Black Isle, it was more of a list of ideas that acted as a suggestion rather than anything concrete. The name Fallout Bible is kinda dubious in that regard. Primarily written by Chris Avalon, it was a collection of 9 books with a bunch of questions submitted by fans and the developers' attempt to correct mistakes, streamline the events, and give more information. But between the updates, there were both changes of minds and disagreements between developers about what is canon. Even encouragements to ignore certain aspects of Fallout 2's Broken Hills due to a distaste of sillier elements. That said, while it was never meant to be taken as solid as some of the fans would like to believe, and isn't treated as such under Bethesda's ownership, it also hasn't been disregarded either. Bethesda has referred to it when writing the games, and has written some of the events into canon, such as Max II being killed by a poisoned Viper arrow, or taking some of the Vault experiments and bringing them into the world. So it has a fair amount of justifications to be taken a lot more seriously than some of the other material below it on this list. Just not too seriously. Now, coded in yellow is some parts are likely canon, most not. This is for Van Buren, the original Fallout 3 that was cancelled due to Interplay shutting down Black Isle, and Tactics. It's a case-by-case basis about what is and isn't canon for this. Van Buren is arguably a bit more justified than Tactics, as New Vegas brought a fair amount of that to the forefront, but in a different form, such as Joshua Graham. It even references some of Van Buren's elements here and there, even if they don't make an appearance, such as one of the Van Graff sisters, Frida. Due to this loose justification, you could probably consider some non-contradictory factions equally loose canon, such as the Daughters of Hecate, but there's no solid confirmation. Tactics. We know some things are canon from it, but it's limited. We know there's a Chicago detachment of the Brotherhood of Steel that fought super mutants and flown a fleet of airships similar to the Pridwin, but that's about the extent of what we know. Specific plot points are debatable. In the orange, we have perhaps the strangest category. Very little is canon, mostly flavor text, not events. This one is very subject to a case-by-case basis, and it covers the oddest of the bunch. Things like shelter, material from the Atom Shop or the Creation Club, and third-party non-electric games, like the Fallout board game, its new California add-on, or the Fallout role-playing game. Most will agree that the events featured in these products aren't canon, particularly Shelter, because, yeah, I can make Vault 13 after the Great War and have 3 Dog living in it. But descriptions for some items may have a nugget of truth to them, and Fallout Shelter Online even gave Roger a max in a phase. The Fallout role-playing game has a pretty sensible description for the Fusion Core system that blends Fallout 1's power armor with Fallout 4's power armor, covering that inconsistency, but it hasn't been officially adopted by the games yet. In short, this tier is the one you want to proceed with caution in. Finally, we get to the red spot. Not canon, don't even worry about it. This is Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, as well as the non-Van Buren cancelled games. Though even in this spot, there's some interesting information that one could look into, but it's probably not worth confusing yourself further with. Actually, there is one extra source of information that's hard to classify. Josh Sawyer's own Fallout role-playing game. It was created in 2004 after he left Black Isle, so he wasn't even in a company that owned Fallout or was working on Fallout at the time. It's unlicensed and essentially fanfiction in a practical matter. But what complicates this is that material from the role-playing game has crept their way into official canon, such as the 80s. It's a faction created for the tabletop experience, but they were mentioned in New Vegas. His RPG defined the 13 Commonwealths. In at least 2 of those, the Southwest and the Midwest, have been mentioned in New Vegas and Fallout 4. Though, to give credit, the idea of the 13 Superstates has at least existed in the Fallout Bible. Josh Sawyer's game defined the boundaries that gave them all a name. Where do you place something like this? Older developer commentary? He was a member of the Van Buren team. Throw it in with third-party non-video games, even if it's unofficial? I don't know. It's probably the oddest source to draw from, really. Interesting, but odd. At any rate, this is what most, with an asterisk, would consider canon with some wiggle room. It's essentially license holders' intent at the time of the release is canon unless contradicted. And for the vast majority, that's enough, but things are never that simple. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about what other divisions think, but I do want to explain why you may want to understand these considerations even if you fall within the above accepted canon. So, the word canon. We hear it and we usually think a fictional narrative's official storyline thus far. It's actually sourced from religion, biblical canon. Canon itself being a Greek word for rule or measuring stick. Essentially, biblical canon refers to various Christian and Jewish groups that have included and excluded religious texts to form their own sets of canon. A biblical canon is a different collection of books, their own truths, and this was done through debate and orchestrated by different religious leaderships. I'm simplifying, of course. This isn't really meant to be a religious history lesson, but it does give a bit of a framework for why it probably shouldn't be easy to dismiss a small community's accepted canon. Like a religious group, different communities may refuse to accept specific source materials for a variety of reasons. Of course, while a god may not speak or make their intentions known, a business can and usually does. Still, does a fictional work's officially declare canonicity matter to a group if not accepted by that group? That's questionable. Some may see only Interplay's published games as canon because that's the company that created the franchise, despite Bethesda's current ownership. Maybe they're a bit softer and accept New Vegas 2, being Obsidian is Black Isle's spiritual successor. Perhaps they only believe in main titles and ignore spin-offs, despite importance, so they only view 1, 2, 3, and 4 as official. Maybe they can't get into 1 or 2, and justify only the 3D games being canon, as Bethesda is the current license holder. Naturally, there are those who dislike 76 and disregard it as canon on that basis alone, or may argue some vaguely understood retcon as their reasoning. There's a number of different interpretations about what to consider canon, though admittedly these smaller groups likely make up a very tiny amount of people. Still, there are some level of justifications for their considerations, though arguably not very strong. What about you? Do you fall into a specific group that considers a special canon, or fall into the mainstream acceptance? And a special thanks to my channel members, especially my member SwiceOver guys like The Crazy Game Developer and Danny McPhee. And if you want to support me and join as well, I'd be more than happy. Also, feel free to join my Discord server and chat with us. Thank you, have a good one.